A railroad does not retire a locomotive because it is broken. It retires it because it bought something newer, and newer is supposed to win. But for 10 locomotives on this list, the replacement came and went. The program was cancelled, the new fleet was sold, the money was written off. And the machine that was supposed to be dead kept showing up on the manifest. This is not a story about machines being tough. It is a story about the decisions that were supposed to end them and what those decisions cost. In the 10th place, the EMD SD40 stands as a textbook case of institutional miscalculation. Launched in 1981 and billed as a 3,500 horsepower leap beyond the SD42, the SD50's debut was marred by a defect ledger that averaged 25 technical failures per unit, including crankshaft fatigue, harmonic vibration, and chronic coolant system breakdowns, all centered on the unproven 645 F3 prime mover. CSX, faced with reliability shortfalls and mounting maintenance costs, issued an internal directive to derate the entire fleet to 3,000 horsepower, nullifying the supposed advantage and reducing the SD50 to the very output it was meant to surpass. Conrail, meanwhile, wagered on a 135-unit order, only to encounter ride quality issues with the HTC truck and a premature withdrawal of the entire class before the end of the decade. The bill was paid twice. First for new power that failed to deliver, then for a fleet-wide rebuild to salvage what could be salvaged. The SD50's survival is not a story of resilience, but a balance sheet of procurement error, warranty claims, and the institutional refusal to accept that a death notice on paper does not guarantee obsolescence in the field. Number 9. The EMD GP382 provides a clear illustration of how retirement on paper often just means shifting costs to a different ledger. Between 1972 and 1986, General Motors built 2,213 GP38-2s, saturating the North American market with a 4-axle, 2,000 horsepower platform designed for branch line and yard duty. By the late 1990s, every major Class 1 carrier had issued formal retirement bulletins, citing surplus horsepower and the arrival of newer, higher-rated models as justification for fleet reduction. The expectation was that these units would exit the balance sheet, replaced by modern power. Instead, the GP382s were offloaded en masse to leasing companies, short-line operators, and regional carriers, entities with neither the capital nor the operational need for expensive new locomotives. Secondary market sale prices routinely averaged $150,000 per unit, far below the depreciated book value, but still preferable to scrap. By 2026, dozens of these same units remain in daily service, now wearing the logos of operators who value simplicity and low overhead above technological novelty. The result is not a triumph of preservation, but a financial shell game. Capital costs are transferred, not eliminated, and the supposed obsolescence of the GP382 is belied by its ongoing utility wherever procurement logic fails to match operational reality. 8th place, the EMD SD40-2, known as the tunnel motor, delivers a case study in how procurement logic fails when it ignores basic engineering reality. Designed with low-mounted radiator intakes to draw cool air from the tunnel floor, the SD40-2 was purpose-built for the Southern Pacific and Denver and Rio Grande Western Mountain routes, where long tunnels and steep grades routinely pushed conventional power to the thermal limit. After Union Pacific absorbed these fleets in 1996, management issued retirement notices in 2009 and 2010, banking on the new SD70M and AC 4400CW units to standardize the roster and eliminate the need for specialized hardware. The results were predictable. Within 2 years, performance logs documented a spike in over-temperature alarms, 3 to 4 times higher in tunnels for the new units than for the retired SD40-2s. FRA incident records from 2012 to 2014 list 7 coolant failures in the Moffat Tunnel, all involving the replacement fleet. Meanwhile, the tunnel motors, sold off to regionals like Illinois Railway, Missouri and Northern Arkansas, and Bessemer and Lake Erie, resumed service on the same routes without a single overheating event in the first 3 years. The airflow diagrams and resale rosters tell a blunt story. Environment-specific engineering outlasts one-size-fits-all procurement. The cost of ignoring this was paid not just in capital outlay for new power, but in lost efficiency, additional repairs, and the quiet humiliation of watching obsolete units return to duty where the replacements could not function. Number 7. The CSX SD40-3 stands as a case study in institutional reversal driven by flawed forecasting. In 2014, CSX issued a formal retirement memo declaring that all remaining SD40-2s would exit the roster in favor of new AC traction power and a planned Tier 4 compliant fleet. The decision was supported by capital budgets and depreciation schedules that assumed these older units were surplus to requirements. Then came the winter of 2013 to 2014, when an unanticipated 15% surge in coal traffic exposed a critical shortfall in available horsepower. New locomotive deliveries lagged, and the anticipated replacements failed to materialize on schedule. Faced with this operational gap, CSX issued a recall directive, ordering 50 stored SD40-2s back into service and authorizing a comprehensive rebuild at the Huntington, West Virginia shop. Each unit received a new cab, air conditioning, microprocessor controls, positive train control hardware, and Tier 0 Plus emissions upgrades. The cost was $1.2 million per locomotive, totaling $60 million in capital outlay. This came after the company had already booked the expense of their retirement and replacement. The Huntington program did not merely extend the life of obsolete power, it forced the railroad to pay for the same horsepower twice in a single decade. Shop bulletins and internal finance notes document a dual expenditure that could have been avoided if procurement logic had matched operational reality. The SD40-3's continued presence is less a tribute to mechanical longevity than a ledger entry exposing the cost of premature obsolescence decrees. Number 6. The EMD SD60 family stands as a case study in interim power that failed to justify its own procurement logic. Between 1990 and 2004, Class 1 railroads placed orders for hundreds of SD60 and SD60M locomotives, each carrying a list price near $2.5 million, capitalized and depreciated on a 20-year schedule that presumed these units would anchor rosters well into the 2020s. The appeal was rooted in next-generation promise, microprocessor controls, higher horsepower, and a path to EPA compliance. In practice, the SD60s delivered neither reliability nor longevity. Early adopters faced teething issues with electronic control systems that drove up shop hours and warranty claims. Fuel burn rates averaged 12% higher than the SD40-2s they were meant to replace, a gap that widened as Tier 2 and Tier 3 emissions retrofits imposed further costs. By the early 2000s, both CSX and Norfolk Southern began writing down SD60M assets, moving dozens to storage or outright scrapping them before the end of their depreciation cycle. The result? Railroads paid twice, once for new power that failed to deliver, and again to rebuild or reactivate the very SD40-2s they had declared obsolete. The continued presence of the SD60s is not a testament to engineering endurance, but to the institutional cost of betting on a transitional technology that aged out before its own capital was recovered. Number 5. The Norfolk and Western High Hood GP38-2 exposes a cost center rarely acknowledged in procurement forecasts: the labor force itself. In 1998, Norfolk and Western's board minutes recorded a formal plan to phase out all high hood GP38-2s, units 3,500 through 3,599, by the end of 1999, with new low hood GP38-2M replacements already budgeted. On paper, this was a straightforward modernization. The plan was to retire the older, less ergonomic cabs, standardize the fleet, and capture efficiency savings. But the calculation ignored the human factor. A union bulletin from the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers, dated May 1997, circulated through every terminal, explicitly resisting the phase-out and citing crew preference for the high hood's visibility in switching service. Bulletins and board minutes from 1998 to 2000 document repeated delays, and assignment rosters show that nearly 70 high-hood GP38-2s remained in active service as late as 2020. The institutional cost was not just the capital outlay for new locomotives, but the hidden expense of labor negotiations, retraining, and operational disruption when crews refused to relinquish the older units. The high-hood GP38-2s survived not because of mechanical superiority, but because management underestimated the workforce's leverage, turning a planned retirement into a protracted, expensive standoff. The result was another case where the costs of forced replacement were paid twice, and the numbers on the ledger told a story of institutional friction rather than technical obsolescence. Number 4. Union Pacific's SD40N rebuild program at the Jenks shops stands as the rare case where the institution's internal audit left no room for sentiment or speculation, just numbers. Between 2010 and 2018, Union Pacific rebuilt 486 SD40-2 locomotives into the SD40N specification, each overhaul guided by a cost spreadsheet that compared every line item against the price of new SD70s. The results were stark. A full SD40N rebuild, including ZTR NextIS microprocessor controls, positive train control upgrades, cab replacements, and Tier 0 plus emissions compliance, averaged just 45% of the cost of a new locomotive. The Jenks project reports document that a new SD70 purchase required an outlay of $2.5 million per unit, while the SD40N rebuilds consistently landed below $1.2 million, including labor, electronics, and retrofit hardware. This was not an isolated pilot or a token gesture toward thrift, it was a fleet-wide policy shift, with 486 units processed through the program. The internal financial analysis, preserved in UP project files, left management with no plausible justification for further new power buys. Instead, the supposed obsolete SD40-2s were systematically modernized and returned to service, while the procurement logic that called for their retirement was quietly abandoned. The SD40N's continued presence is not a story of mechanical nostalgia, but a ledger entry that exposes the gap between capital expenditure planning and operational reality. The numbers did not merely argue for life extension, they forced it, and the institution's own spreadsheets became the most damning evidence against its original decision. Coming to the top 3, the SD45 rebuilt into the SD40M2 stands as the most literal reversal of procurement logic in modern railroading. Southern Pacific's original SD45 fleet, delivered with 20-cylinder EMD 6445E3 engines rated at 3,600 horsepower, quickly became a maintenance liability. The 20-cylinder blocks suffered from chronic crankshaft fractures, oil leaks, and a documented pattern of block cracking. Engineering reports from the late 1980s logged failure rates more than double those of the standard 16-cylinder SD40-2. By the early 1990s, Southern Pacific had issued formal retirement notices for its SD45s, expecting that new power would fill the gap. Instead, the railroad contracted Morrison Knudsen from 1993 to 1995 to rebuild 97 SD45s into SD40M2s, a conversion that stripped out the problematic 20-cylinder prime mover and replaced it with the 16-cylinder 645E3 engine, the very heart of the SD40-2. The rebuilds reused the original SD45 frames and trucks, but every critical power plant component was reverted to the predecessor's specification. Internal project documentation from the MK program details a per-unit cost of $900,000, compared to $2.2 million for a new locomotive at the time. The financial ledger is blunt. Southern Pacific paid once for an overpowered, under-engineered fleet, then paid again to undo that decision, ending up with a machine that, in effect, became its own replacement. The SD40M2's continued service is not a tribute to mechanical nostalgia, but a direct audit of the institutional error that made the SD45 obsolete twice. Number 2, Canadian National's SD40-2W provides a textbook example of how institutional retirement plans can unravel in full public view. On January 12, 2021, Canadian National issued a formal phase-out bulletin targeting SD40-2W units 5338 through 5400 for disposal by the end of that year, citing a system-wide standardization on GE Evolution Series power. The directive was explicit: scrap or sell, eliminate redundancy, and close the books on a locomotive class that had, in management's view, outlived its usefulness. But by 2025, a significant number of these same wide cab units remain in active service, assigned to branch lines, yards, and secondary duties where their supposed replacements have proven overpowered, too heavy, or simply uneconomical for the work at hand. The numbers are not ambiguous. Of the 63 units named in the 2021 bulletin, industry rosters confirmed that more than 24 continue to operate under Canadian National's own reporting marks, with others leased or sold to regionals but still running in Canada and the northern United States. Lease and sale notices from 2022 and 2023 document repeated delays and outright cancellations of disposition, as traffic fluctuations and equipment shortages made it impossible for Canadian National to meet its own deadlines. The financial ledger shows the cost of this reversal. Capital was spent on new GE units, only for the older SD40-2W units to be retained as insurance against the very operational gaps that standardization was supposed to eliminate. The SD40-2W's continued presence is not a story of mechanical heroism, but of procurement hubris. The 2021 phase-out bulletin stands as a monument to the gap between policy and reality, a gap measured not in nostalgia, but in ongoing payroll, maintenance, and capital charges for equipment that, by official decree, should no longer exist. The result is a visible, international example of how a retirement plan can collapse in less than 4 years when operational necessity refuses to cooperate with institutional intent. And finally, in first place, the EMD SD40-2 stands as the definitive audit of institutional miscalculation in North American railroading. Across 4 decades, no other locomotive has been targeted by so many overlapping retirement programs, capital replacement campaigns, and formal end-of-life declarations, only to remain indispensable when the numbers fail to justify its removal. The SD40-2's survival is not a tribute to mechanical legend, but a running tally of procurement logic gone wrong. The ledger is unambiguous. Since 1981, Class 1 railroads have spent a cumulative $7.2 billion on replacement programs explicitly designed to eliminate the SD40-2, the SD50, SD60, SD70, AC400CW, and a parade of next-generation platforms, each with its own capital outlay, depreciation schedule, and warranty reserve. Add to that a projected $2 billion in direct retirement costs, buyouts, scrapping, and replacement purchases, still sitting on the books as of 2025. SEC 10K filings, the Top 21 memo, and annual board minutes all document the same cycle: announce obsolescence, spend heavily on new power, then quietly recall or rebuild the very units slated for extinction. The pattern is systematic, not anecdotal. CSX, Union Pacific, and Norfolk Southern have each issued at least 2 formal death announcements for the SD40-2 since the late 1990s. Every time, the plan collapsed under operational reality. The SD40-2s reappeared as SD40N rebuilds at Union Pacific's Jenks shops, 486 units modernized at an average of $1.2 million each, compared to $2.5 million for a new SD70. CSX and Norfolk Southern followed suit, returning hundreds of stored units to service as SD40-2-3s, with microprocessor controls, PTC hardware, and Tier 0 Plus emissions packages. Each program was justified by internal cost analyses that, when finally published, revealed a 45% savings over new purchases and a lower total cost of ownership by every measurable metric. Yet the original capital outlay for their supposed replacements remains on the balance sheet. As of 2025, more than 1,000 SD40-2s remain active across Class 1, regional, and short-line rosters. The institutional cost of their repeated retirement is not just historical, it is ongoing, visible in every quarterly impairment charge, every recall memo, and every line item in the capital budget for redundant new power. The machine did not outlive its death notice because it was indestructible. It survived because the institution failed to match procurement logic to operational need. The SD40-2 is not a monument to engineering endurance, but a living indictment of the financial and managerial decisions that tried and failed to kill it. The numbers are the verdict. In the end, the only thing obsolete was the retirement plan itself. Across all 10 cases, one pattern is unambiguous. Each locomotive survived not because of mechanical romance, but because the replacement program failed economically, operationally, or both. Every retirement plan became a double entry in the loss column. New power that underdelivered, and old power recalled at cost. The true lesson isn't durability, it's that procurement logic, untested by reality, keeps writing the same expensive mistake. Institutional error, not nostalgia, is what endures.